put this on first. Cool. Thank you guys. I'm so excited to be here. I live in the East Coast now, but from Chicago. Just want to mention my first book, A Most Beautiful Thing. It is a film that you can watch on Amazon Prime or Apple. When you get a chance, it's produced by Dwayne Wade and Common and Grant Hill, which is a pretty awesome film. And then this book just came out, Let Me Be Real With You, which went #1 in the country first week. It was pretty cool to see #1, Arshay Cooper, #2, Kamala Harris, #3, Nicholas Sparks. So it's pretty freaking awesome. I want to thank Matt Ahern for inviting me, and his family so supportive of our foundation, and thank you for bringing me in this morning. So a little bit about myself. I grew up on the west side of Chicago. Very challenging upbringing. I have never said the word dad a day in my life. My mother wasn't around for a very long time. My brothers was in gangs. I failed the 8th grade. I've heard gunshots when I slept. Lost a lot of friends, skipped over pools of blood, seen a lot as a young person, so didn't have a lot of hope. I remember when I got married, my teacher said that she told me, I said in class, well, God exists everywhere but here. And I believed that as a young person because it was so hard to see good. And that affected my everyday life. And at my school, at that time, it was the second most violent high school in the west side of Chicago. And I remember sitting in the classroom one day and didn't do a ton of work. And I was sent down to the dean's office for the first time. And my goal was never to end up in the dean's office. And so I go to the dean's office. The dean's name was Mr. LaFleur. And he's like, what happened? And I was like, dude, I just don't want to be here, man. And he's like, dude, you only been in school an hour. And I looked at him and I said, what makes you think I'm talking about school? And he looked and he took his notebook and he starts writing. And he said, you need sports. And I was like, nah, man, sports is not for me. I loved football, but I remember my first day at practice, I caught the football and the coach was like, knock him dead. And everyone was running towards me and I wanted to fight because of it triggered the trauma of being chased, being jumped. And so it just didn't make me feel right. So I was like, football's not for me. And then I remember saying, what about basketball? I was like, no. If you're not good, they tell you garbage. You're like, you suck. And I heard those things from my uncles. And so that triggered a lot of trauma. So I said, sports is not for me. And some time after that, I remember walking in the lunchroom in my high school. And there was this white boat there. And I've never seen a boat in my life. I'd never even been downtown, 15 years old, west side of Chicago, and never been downtown. And there's this white boat, and behind this white boat was this TV monitor. And I remember stopping and staring at this boat. And at my school at that time, there was a lot of just black teachers, all black students. And when I was staring at this boat, this white lady who walked up to me, she said, hey, you want to join the crew team? And I was like, crew? What's that? Because we were taught, if someone asks you to join a crew, run the other way as fast as you can, right? And I was like, crew? And I was like, there's already so many gangs now. There's a white woman starting a gang in our school. They gentrifying the gangs now. That's crazy. And I was like, no, I don't know what that is. And she said, let me show you. And so behind the boat was the TV monitor, and they were showing the Olympic Games. And the sport looked like the most amazing opportunity, the way these men were moving this boat on the water. But none of these guys looked like me, and it didn't look like the world I was used to, so I said no to the opportunity, and I walked away. And no one signed up. And then the next day I went to school, the boat was still there, the woman was still there, the TV was still there, and then everyone was signing up. And I was like, wow, why does everyone sign up? And it says, if you sign up, you get free deep dish pizza. And I was like, okay, I understand. But to eat that deep dish pizza, you had to go up to the info session after. And I remember walking up to the info session and seeing all these guys from different neighborhoods and different gangs. And this guy gave this powerful speech about the power of rowing. And I didn't know how to swim, and it seems like rowing solves that. I didn't have a lot of friends, and it seems like rowing solves that. I never traveled before, and it seems like rowing solved that. And there was so many things in my life that I was looking for, I was searching for, and I felt like this was the one. And then they took us out to the water, and we got in this boat, downtown Chicago, very first time downtown. And stroke by stroke, we began to develop that magical rhythm that I saw on the TV screen. And I tell you, taking young kids who have grown up seeing dirt and concrete every day to water and grass changed everything. This sport was non-combative, it was non-conflict. You out there in the same survival mode that tells you if you hear a gunshot, run, told us in order to get back to the dock safely, you have to pull for each other. And so stroke by stroke, we begin to catch that rhythm. And before it becomes a sport of competitiveness, it became a sport of meditation. And this was like the first sport that calmed the storm in me. And it was not an introduction to sports, but it was an introduction to environmental wellness, physical wellness, social wellness, and intellectual wellness. And that was the start of the first all-black high school rowing team in the history of our country. And I took it serious. So it's not only was it a rowing team, it was a rowing and entrepreneurship team. And every Thursday we had to sit in entrepreneurship class. And I remember sitting in my first class. And you guys hear me, right? And this guy walks in, and he reaches in his pocket, and he pulls out some money. And he looks at everybody and said, "Who wants this?" And I know how much money it was, but everyone raised their hands. He said, "Who wants this?" And everyone just like screaming, "I want it." He's like, "No, who wants it?" He got louder, and everyone got louder. "I want it, I want it, I want it." And everyone's shouting they want this money. And I thought to myself, I don't know how much money it is, but if I can get this money, I'm not gonna buy ice cream, I'm not gonna buy a video game, I'm not gonna buy a cheeseburger, but I'm gonna take it home to my grandmother so we can have food at home. Because most nights there was no food. So I didn't just want this money, like I need it, I was desperate for it. And so I remember jumping up and screaming, "I want it!" And he looked at me. And the way he looked at me, I just knew he was gonna give it to me. Like he locked in with me. And then I see this guy, it was Malcolm, he runs up to the front of the class and took the money out of his hand and ran to his seat. And the guy, Ken, told him, "It's yours." And I was crushed and I was hurt because I felt like he was supposed to give it to me. I screamed louder than everybody. And what Ken said completely changed my mentality as a young person. He said, if you want something, if you want justice for your community or peace for your community, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be captain of the team, you want to win, you want to be the best at what you do, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, you can't just scream about it. You can't just shout about it. You can't just tell your friends, "I want to be or I'm going to be." But if you want something, you have to get up and go get it. That college spot has your name on it. But you can't just talk about it, son. You have to get up and go get it, because if you don't, someone else will. And I decided that day that there would be no distance between my dreams and my actions. That I will always close the gap, that I will go after it, that opportunity are for those who need it and those who make themselves available for it, and go get it. And so I became the man I wanted to be by showing up every single day. I wasn't the smartest person in my class, but I outworked everyone. I wasn't the most talented, the strongest, the tallest person on my rowing program, but I outworked everybody. On every team, there's always someone who wants it a little bit more than everyone else. On every single team. Even if it's just a little bit more, or even at your job or your department, there's always someone who wants it a little bit more. And I became that person. And I went from a D student to an A student, and I went from just a regular rower to the captain of the team. And I remember when I was first named captain of the team, I showed up at the boathouse. And I was like feeling myself because I was the captain, and I worked myself like crazy. I outworked everyone. I showed up early, I stayed late. I just wanted to be the best. My body changed, my mind changed. And I remember walking in the boathouse, and when you walk into the boathouse, you have to get your oars from the other side at the other side of the boathouse. And there was these like towels, and there was these like oars on the ground. And I remember stepping over it to go get the oar, and my coach, Eugene, was like, "Come here." And I was like, "What's up?" He said, "Come here." And I was like, "What's up?" He said, "Why did you step over the mess?" And I was like, "Because I didn't make the mess." He said, "In our boathouse, we leave it better than we found it, even if we didn't make the mess." And I said, well, Coach, how does that teach the next person responsibility if I have to clean up their mess? And he looked at me and said, in our boathouse, we leave it better than we found it, even if we didn't make the best. He said, why do you think? And we shared the boathouse with 3 private schools. And I said, I guess it makes it easier for the next group. And he said, one day you'll understand. And I went home and I was like, what am I missing? Leave the boathouse better than you found it, even if you didn't make the mess, because it makes it easier for the next group. Like, that is it. And I went back the next day and I was like, I got it. He's like, okay. I said, leave the boathouse better than you found it, even if you didn't make the mess. It makes it easier for the next school, the next group. And he said, one day you'll understand. And some time passed, and I was sitting in the lunchroom, and I was still like the fastest person on my team now, the best scores. And I was really happy about that. But I was watching my teammates, and Alvin, he's the co-captain of the team. And he was suffering because his mother was a drug addict. My mom was a drug addict. And then she came home. She went to a Christian recovery home and changed. She came home. And I knew the place that can change his mom. Like, I knew the place, but I felt like it wasn't my business. So I stepped over it. Josh was the baby brother of the team, was bullied every single day by the upperclassmen to the point that he started harming himself. And it was my friends and Alvin's friends. And all I had to do was tell them to stop, and they would have. But I didn't, because I felt like it wasn't my responsibility. So I stepped over it. Even the simple things about kids who needed a little bit of work or tweaking with their athletics or with their rowing, I was like, I figured it out on myself. They had to figure it out, and I stepped over it. And it was almost like the world we live in today, where we may say, what goes on in the west side of Chicago has nothing to do with me. Or what happens with this group of people has nothing to do with me. Or what happens with police and black community has nothing to do with me. Or what happens at that church or that job or that department at work has nothing to do with me. But when I was thinking about my teammates and how they were suffering, and I'm at this school where everyone knew each other and what people were going through, and every day, everyone was just stepping over it. And that is when I got what Eugene was saying. If we can just leave our boathouse, our classroom, our kids, our family, our community, our country, better than we found it, even if we didn't make the mess, it makes it easier for the next generation and for our kids. And that is when I learned, okay, on every team, there is always someone who wants it a little bit more than everyone else. And people are content with that. Some NBA players, NFL players, they're okay with that. But when MJ was playing, it was like, how do we get everyone else on the team to want it just as much as I do? And if I can do that, that is when you're limping in your championship rounds. And that is the first lesson I learned in rowing, is how to be a great leader and how to take care of others. Because what you learn in the boat is that you cannot do the work of 8, but if you can find 8 to do the work of 1, we get the job done faster. Pastor cannot do the work of 8. He cannot do the work of 10 because there's so much help and need in this city and in this country. But if we can get everyone else to do it, to be a part of it, to lay their brick instead of one person being the bridge, we see that bridge early in life. We see that bridge tomorrow. And that is what I was learning. And so I became very active in the water and outside of the water. And we made history, and we was in the papers. And then I graduated high school, and then I go to Le Cordon Bleu. I become a chef. I get a job working with WWE Wrestling, which was awesome, by the way, and a crazy life. Traveled with those guys for a very long time, and then got a job working with Warner Brothers as a food stylist. So I moved to New York, and I have my fancy apartment. I'm going out, I'm hanging out. It's been 6-7 years out of Le Cordon Bleu, and life is amazing. And this lady looks at me that works with me at Warner Brothers, and she says, my husband's a teacher in Harlem, all black school, and I think you should go talk to these boys. You look like you have a story. And I was like, no, I don't have a story. She's like, can you speak to them? I was like, no, I'm good. And so another week later, she said, hey, you think you can speak to these guys? Like, my husband would love for you to come speak. And I was like, no, I'm good. And it's not that I didn't want to help these young men. I knew in order to connect with them, I had to talk about the things that I haven't yet healed from. I wasn't ready for it. And I said no. And then one day she said, they're giving my husband a hard time. And that's when I knew that these kids were having a hard time. And so I went, and it's been years since I walked through the halls of learning. And I walked into school, and half of these boys looked like they didn't want to be there. The other half was looking at me like, help me. And I split myself open, and I told my story and how hard it was navigating my everyday life as a young person. And at the end of that speech, I just asked every young man in there, I said, what's your dream? And auctioneer style, they started saying these pretty lofty dreams like NBA player, NFL player, astronaut, actor. And then there was only one kid that raised his hand. And I said, what's your dream? And he said, my dream is to eat at Chipotle. And everyone starts laughing. And he sunk in his seat. And the look in his eyes was so familiar because I knew what it was like to not be able to go out to eat. And at the end of that, I walked up to that husband and I said, here's $20. You have to make sure this kid eat at Chipotle. And he said, you did enough. I was like, no, you don't understand. If we can eliminate the small dream, there's room for bigger dreams. There's room for more dreams. And remember, my dream was to only go downtown Chicago. Never been. And when I went down there, I was like, Coach, I got to go out of town. Like my dreams got bigger when I eliminated a dream. And from there, I went home and I couldn't stop thinking about these kids. Like I was known to be a great chef. I was known to be a rower. When you think of like MLK, you don't think about the educated preacher, but you think about the hope that he brought to this country. When you think about Harriet Tubman, you don't think about her career as a Union spy, but you think about the freedom that she brought to so many people. When you think about Nelson Mandela, you don't think about the attorney, but you think about the peace that he brought to so many villages. So when you represent something bigger than your career, your major, yourself, that's when change happens. Like, what do people think about when they see us? But I couldn't stop thinking about this kid. And so a week later, I spoke at this conference. And it was the rowing convention, very first time speaking in front of all these rowers to share my story. And a lot of them didn't even know this story. And it was all the best coaches in the country that coached at Harvard and Penn and Yale and the national team and the Olympic team. And I tell my story, and the first question, the guy raises his hand. He says, cool story, but how many of you guys went on to row in the Ivies? And I was like, oh, okay. I said, here's my question for you, for everyone in this room. Think about your favorite coach of all times. Think about your coach, your favorite coach, and everything you have learned from your favorite coach. And everything you have learned, tell me in one word, what was the number one thing you have learned? And they start saying words like grit and trust and connection, and family, persistence, commitment, perseverance, love, and hope, and grit. And I said, so you guys have spent years and years rowing and beating on your craft, and no one said rowing or erging or feather or the stroke or none of the technical things. Why? Because it is so much more than rowing. Every young person, no matter who they are, where they came from, the color of their skin, the God of their prayers, that they're looking for that one word. And if we can give them that one word, things change. And so my story is about giving access and opportunities to that one word. And that is what I was thinking about when I was thinking about this kid with this Chipotle story. And all of us in this room have been given hope before from a teacher, a father, a mentor. And I believe the one word for you, the one word that you receive was transformed into the word or the hope that we give to others. And so we can continue that legacy of hope and commitment and perseverance. And so after that, I started volunteering. I wrote my first book, A Most Beautiful Thing. And it became a film. Then it won some awards. And then it started changing lives. And then I met Matt's dad. He reached out and was like, I love your story. He read it in the Wall Street Journal. He said, I want to help support this. And then we found other supporters. And in our first year, we introduced 1,000 kids who couldn't afford rowing to the sport of rowing. And then we expanded. Listen, this started in 2021, and now we're in 23 cities and in 4 cities in South Africa. Like, we have grown at a fast pace, and I've been working, and we have changed lives. Not only that, I don't know if you guys watched the documentary, one of the things we have done, I was taught by my mom, when you see the need, meet the need. We took black men who've been in gangs, who've been incarcerated, who have not been in gangs, and we took white Chicago cops, and we put them in a boat downtown Chicago to have conversations. And they were uncomfortable. But we all know if you was an athlete that you don't accomplish anything comfortable. But the same water where we didn't get along at first, when we kind of escaped the world and we're out there and we surrounded by water and grass and the quiet skies, they build a brotherhood. We can bring different brotherhoods together to have conversations. And then their kids saw it. And it changed the perspective of those kids. And we start getting calls from other cities, like, how do we do that here? And then veterans who needed to experience wellness, we start introducing them to the sport of rowing. And athletes with disability. And we were moving fast because I wanted to go after it. I wanted to leave the world better than I found it. And my agent came to me and said, you have to write another book. And I was like, I'm so tired. She's like, no, you got to write another book. And she said that, because this book was nominated for an NAACP Image Award. And that was like a big deal for me because I grew up watching the NAACP Image Awards with my grandmother. And every year on TV, watching Denzel win one and all these great people win one. And my grandmother, I'd call my grandmother and say, Grandma, I am nominated for an NAACP Image Award. She said, number one, you have to write another book. But number two, you have to have the faith that you're gonna win. The same way you sit on a chair, you don't check the legs, you sit down, you just know, you have to know that you're gonna win. And you split yourself open, you made an impact, you're gonna win. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna win. And she said, who are the nominees? And I was like, it's Barack Obama's book. It's the new Malcolm X book, it's this book. And she said, well, you better be grateful that you nominated me. And I was like, and so, you know what? I started to write this book and I didn't know what to write about. And I was like, I want to write about just how do we give back and how we bring this world together and the lessons I learned from rowing. And I was stuck. And I was stuck writing this book. And I was so busy and I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I'm raising kids. I'm getting up, it's a war in the morning every single day, and you're doing this and your wife is working. And every day you guys are measuring who does what and who does that. And then everyone at work, some people are dropping the ball and some people are doing great and everyone's calling you, everyone's needing you. And there's boat houses out there where it's pretty diverse, but people are not getting along and they're calling me, hey, can you help bring this team together? Like, can you do this with the cops? And some people don't like that. And some people think it's great. Like, everything was happening. And I'm trying to write this book and I began to drown. Like, I almost drowned as a young person learning to row. When I was 15 years old, I remember going out there. And here's the thing about drowning, or almost like when you feel like you're drowning, almost going to drown, is that the pressure, the force, is intense. The anxiety, the stress is so overwhelming. And I remember when I was drowning, saying to myself, if I cry out for help, my friends are gonna laugh at me. Because they were getting it. I was like, I gotta figure this out. And I was losing myself and I cried out for help and a lifeguard took the hook and he pulled me in. And I started feeling the same anxiety, pressure, force, and stress. But this time I said to myself, the only way that people are gonna know that I'm drowning is when I drown. I wouldn't say anything. And I started thinking about, if I can tell myself, the younger version of myself, anything, it would be, you don't have to fight alone. And I kid you not, guys, I did an interview with Liz Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and I had a dream. And, I was like, I'm not writing this book, and I had this dream. I'm gonna wrap it up with this, is I was on the subway, on the train, waiting for the train, on the platform train, and I saw this family in my dream, and this little boy looked at me and he jumped onto the tracks. And I ran over there, and I was like, hey, get off the tracks, get off the tracks. And he wouldn't even look at me. And I was screaming, get off the tracks, and just wouldn't look at me. So I started yelling at his family, your son's on the tracks, your son's on the tracks. And he wouldn't even acknowledge me at all. And so I started screaming at everyone, this boy's on the tracks. No one's paying attention. And so the train was coming. I jumped onto the tracks. And when I reached for him, he vanished. And when I looked on the platform, he was there with his family and everyone else. And they was yelling at me, get off the tracks, get off the tracks, get off the tracks. And the train was right there and it was coming. And I jumped out of my sleep. I had many nightmares, but this was the first time I ever jumped out of my sleep. And I was telling people about it. And they was like, yeah, you're just doing too much. And so I called Liz Gilbert, and I told her the dream, and right away she said, I believe that you are everyone in the dream. So I believe that you are you who's trying to save the boy, who's trying to save everybody. She said, I believe that you are the boy that needs to be saved. I believe that you are everybody who is not listening to you. She said, I believe that you are the train that's running yourself down. And she said, wellness, my friend, wellness. And I remember starting the book, and the very first sentence, I said, I made it my mission to save every child I could, every person I could, but I forgot the most important one, the child within me. The things that I just suffered from, wasn't willing to talk about, the things that I buried deep inside, and I buried alive, and every time it was triggered, it came with an explosive force. And I had a hard time when I'm given to my family, when I'm given to my job, when I'm given to this world and everything. I had a hard time including myself in the world I was given to. It was hard to contribute service to the world without sacrificing my own self-care. And this book is really about how do we be a better angel to ourselves so we can be a better angel to the world. And sometimes we take all the intangible lessons we learn and we go after it. And we leave things better than we found it. And we work hard and we push people. And sometimes we have to redirect all that love and all those things we give out to the world towards ourselves. And I couldn't do it by myself. I needed God. I needed a higher power. I needed someone who I know that can love me. And that's when, I went back to where it started, crying out to Jesus. And what this book introduces you to is the 8 elements of wellness. Because I don't know if anyone ever watched the Jeffersons back in the days. The song was, finally got a piece of the pie. And he was a guy who needed some dough. He made the money. He moved up to the Upper East Side. And he had the money. He had the financial wellness. But he was still angry about every single thing, everything else. And some of us, sometimes we have a piece of the pie. You say, I go to church, but there's still something missing. I have financial wellness, but there's still something missing. Or I see a therapist and there's still something missing. And the 8-element wellness talk about not just having a piece of the pie, but having the whole pie, which is, real quick, mental and emotional wellness, physical wellness, environmental wellness, vocational wellness, intellectual wellness, social wellness, being around good people, and spiritual wellness. I used to go and give my grandmother this rose, and I would buy from Jewel. And here's the thing, I would try everything to keep it alive. Water, the sun, all these tricks. But the moment it's disconnected, it dies. And for me, I've done so many things to try to keep myself alive and keep myself going, but I was disconnected from the source, the God who gave me life. And I had to return in order to live the way I wanted to live and embrace all these elements of wellness. And so that's a bit of my story. And the secret sauce for me is like when you see a football player out there and they run it in for a touchdown, and you watch that highlight, and everyone celebrates, and it's cool, and they score this touchdown, and they're celebrating, but it's just, lightning just doesn't strike, and you're a #1 bestseller. No, you have to have something in you that attracts the lightning. And for a football player, and for everyone out here who's trying to score a touchdown, to be the best father, to be the best husband, to be the best CEO, COO, the best mentor, the best coach, you want to score touchdowns. But I want you to understand this, like, what keeps that football player sustainable after all the hits, the beatdowns, and everything that's happening? What keeps them going? What keeps them scoring touchdowns? Because I want you to understand this. When you want to score a touchdown, you have to understand that there are going to be days that people are going to love you like a football player, and there's going to be days that people don't like you. There's going to be days where you're wide open and you study the route and you feel like nobody sees you. No one recognizes the work that you do. There are gonna be days that you drop the ball. There are gonna be days that the people around you are gonna take the hit just so you can get to the next round, the ones that are closer to you. But what makes a football player sustainable, what keeps them going, what makes them successful is the timeouts and the huddles that they take when they're not in the game. Like, this is the huddle. This is where you begin to reflect. This is where you know where to pivot. When they're taking their time out, they're not just sleeping on the bench, although sleep is great. They're not just chilling, but they're putting the right things in their body. They're reflecting, they're asking questions, they're getting answers, they're reading the playbook, they're reading, they're studying, they're listening, they're checking out things, and they get back in the game, healthy and strong. So, that's the life I live today, and that's what's keeping me well. My friends, support groups, God, and everything else. And so this young man who went through all those things grew up to do all this amazing work because I have men like you in my life, and I keep showing up, I keep going after it, but I make sure I include myself in everything I give into. So keep giving, but keep including yourself. Thank you, that's my story.
Yeah. Hey guys, we do have some questions on the table. I was just going to say, does anyone want to ask some questions, Arshay?
Have you read or seen the movie The Boys in the Boat? And if so, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I saw The Boys in the Boat. I know the writer very well. He actually blurred my book. I think it's an amazing story. It's a great story for our sport, to be able to just bring guys together who take their challenge, all those challenges you have in life. I feel like rowing's tough. You got to get up at 5 a.m. There's no timeouts. You're pulling for an hour straight. You're breaking your backs. Your hands ripped apart. And I think what was cool about rowing, especially for my guys, is like once you do that, some things becomes very simple in life. Like, I can do anything if I can do that. And so you learn in the work world, like how to get up, how to work well with others, how to trust people. You know what I mean? Understand that the small distractions can't destroy your journey. Keep your head in the boat. The fear that you create becomes your reality. Like, there's so many lessons that I've learned from that film that the world has learned through reading it, and the same thing with our book. But yeah, I have seen it.
So you guys that don't know that, you've seen the movie, read the book too.
Yeah, the book is awesome. It's a lot better.
Probably one of my top 3 books of all time.
Yeah. We'll wait till you read this one. Yeah, we better read that. Yeah, you gotta read that. You gotta read that. Yeah, that'll be 15. Yeah.
At a high school, you went to the Court of Blue. How did you get back into rowing? Was it that speech?
After the speech, I called Concept to you, and I was like, hey, can you donate some ergs to this school? This is what I see. This is what I learn. And the goal became to, our mission is to make sure that every boathouse reflects the full diversity of this city, bringing people together from every corner of the city to work together as one. Yeah. Kind of pulled back. Yeah, I kind of pulled back in. Yeah, and it was a slow process. And I was like, more and more I started speaking, more and more we started mentoring. And Boathouse was called, hey, can you consult and work with us on speed and all this? And then I kind of worked my way out of the career into the calling.
What's been, you mentioned all the cities that you're in, South Africa, everywhere else. What has been the response to that difficult sport, tough sport for all the reasons that you said, and I think an outstanding sport. But how, you said it's been going on 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
What has been the response to all of that? I just out of genuine curiosity.
Yeah, I mean,
what does it look like now?
It looks great. So every program, so basically we go in there, there's these programs that kind of, there's programs that didn't exist that we helped start, but the most successful part is these programs who've been just surviving. We're like 2-3 board members, 10 kids, 1 staff member, and we give them a grant, right, to bring on a coach. And we also bring in like college coaches to mentor them. We pay them for their time. We give them new boats, new rowing machines, and then our team go in there, recruit kids in their schools. And we bring more kids in by showing the film and giving them books and things like that. And then we give them money to... Yeah, exactly. And then we pay for them to go race, and the team grows. And then we take the captains of all those teams every summer, take them to a camp on leadership, and they kind of bring that fire back, and they become they are the leaders. They help the coaches recruit. And so that's how we grow. And also, we created a cohort of these coaches where they come together and they kind of sharpen each other. And so we just growing together.
Okay, well, thank you.
Well, I think there's one more. Yeah.
Is the movie streaming anywhere?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon Prime and Apple TV. Watch it today. You guys will enjoy it. I mean, especially the scene with like the cops and us rowing. I mean, this was like 2019 when that happened. We invited them out, and it was uncomfortable at first. It was so strange and so weird, but we went out there every day, and we just became friends. And we speak, together. The Today Show did a great segment on it, and it really impacted different parts, not only of our sport, but our cities, and it's a cool thing. So definitely check out the film.
Yeah, one last question. I support a group in the city that brings kids together with sports and with the police and with ministers and with business people, and they're pulling kids from multiple gang areas, right? So have you had the experience where the gangs are actually against what you're trying to do, or have threatened what you're trying to do to help kids, break out of that way of life?
Yeah.
Are the gangs against, have you seen them fight against you or threaten you?
No, we have not. Like our approach is like one of the things when I talk to people, I said we have to make investments in communities before we can just go there and say, I'm trying to help you or save you. Like you go to a bank, you don't get a withdrawal unless you make a deposit, right? And we made deposits by starting in Boys and Girls Clubs, in churches, and reaching out to those people who know the people in gangs. And they kind of be like, hey, do this. Like, I'm not going to the gang, be like, hey, asking them and we have done really great work with bringing gangs together, and we have stories around that. But we have used the community. We have invested in the community and worked with them, and they have done more with them to bring them in and say, hey, we want to introduce your kids to it. We want you to understand that, like, what peace feels like for the first time. And they go out there and they're competitive, right? But it takes time to do that, right? And our approach with cops or the gangs is that we don't go in there calling people out. We want to call them in, and we let them be fully who they are, with their bias or whatever it may be. And every day we just show them love, and eventually you see things change, right? It doesn't happen overnight. Even when we wrote, it took a minute, but we just kept showing up, right? And so that's our approach, was like just keep making deposits in different ways, through food, through different kids in their neighborhoods. Start off playing just like, even if it's basketball, and then we work our way to rowing. And some people will say no, but those who say yes, that's who we focus on. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you guys for your time.
I'll ask you after.
Okay. No, go ahead.
So your foundation is focused on athletics connecting with opportunity, access, leadership across a bunch of areas. Have you done any sort of peer-to-peer with other groups that are doing not similar things, because nobody, I don't think, is touching rowing, but there's other organizations like here in Chicago, Beat the Streets, which is also in New York, and that's wrestling.
Yep.
And they've done really well.
Yep.
First team has done
Yep.
really well providing that access.
Yep.
And these other things. Have you done any like peer-to-peer with other groups?
Yeah, we have. Beat the Streets is definitely one, especially the one in New York. That's where we have done work with them. Beat the Streets in Newark, New Jersey. And so the last thing I'll say is like Red Bull kind of pulled together all these folks who were creating access and opportunity in those untraditional, expensive sports. So like what I do for rowing, the guy who looks like me, who works with surfing or fencing, they kind of brought these groups together. And because, I believe that sports have made an impact in so many ways, but it becomes more mainstream and more inspiring and more joyful when everyone's included. When we can include every single person from every corner of the country. Talent is everywhere, but access and opportunity is not. And that's what like Beat the Streets does. And we came together and was like, how do we diversify more of our sports and make our Olympic team better? All our Olympic teams, and that's kind of the goal. Not to like, I was interviewing with this lady. She said, "So you're changing the face of the sport?" I said, "No, I'm not trying to change no face. We want to add new spaces, add new faces to the sport." And yes, we have connected because we don't have all the answers, but we have connected with a lot of other programs. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.